G'day there, Dan. Welcome to the show. Great to have you on board, mate.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Daniel. It's really wonderful to chat with you and to reach to your community.
As I was saying just before we hit the record button, it's a little bit of a different medium for me, and I'm really enjoying being able to connect with people like yourself in this way, and also to be able to provide some amazing content that you guys are obviously willing to share. Now, you tell me a little bit about yourself. There's not going to be many people that are watching or listening that don't know who you are, but for the people that actually don't know who you are, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you came from, and what you're actually doing today.
Yeah, sure. So I have been in IT for about 25 years, all that time working alongside Microsoft. So I was involved with the initial waves of Windows NT, Active Directory, group policy, working on Windows Server and client technologies, and then caught the SharePoint wave in about 2006 and was very deeply involved with customers deploying SharePoint for about 10 years after that. So all along standing outside of Microsoft, but alongside Microsoft was an MVP, wrote a bunch of books, spoke at a bunch of events around the world, where I ran into the great community that we have for SharePoint and now Microsoft 365. And then in 2016, got a job offer I couldn't refuse, which was to come in and lead marketing for SharePoint. Eventually, that led to OneDrive, Yammer, Microsoft Stream, Microsoft Search, what became Microsoft Viva Connections and Topics, and Microsoft Stream. So a whole range of topics to lead marketing inside Microsoft up in Redmond. And then right around the middle of last year, during the middle of the pandemic, I decided to make some changes to really support my life and the direction I was going and my well-being and that of my family. And we chose to move down to Phoenix, Arizona from Redmond. And along with that, took a job outside of marketing over on the product team. So I took off my marketing hat, put on a product hat. And since then, I've been leading a team on the Yammer product group that is responsible for integrations of Yammer into Teams, and also is leading a ridiculously cool new set of capabilities that we will announce early next year.
Yeah, and we'll touch on the Yammer and Teams story a little bit later as well. So you've kind of been across a lot of different products across Microsoft.
Yep.
Give me your favorite.
Well, I have to say Yammer now, of course.
Well,
right?
Of course you do. Of course you do. Of course you do.
And we'll talk a lot about why that's the case. But actually, I would say my favorite product right now is our suite. And that's one of the really key things.
You can't say that.
I can, though, because that's what people buy. That is our product, right? And the cool thing is it's different. You know, I spent decades with these, what were then very siloed server products, whether it was Windows or SharePoint or Exchange or Link or Skype or whatever that might be. And each of them provided a lot of value to customers, but they also required a huge amount of heavy lift. Every 3 years, there was a new version. So customers usually waited every 6 years at best. And then all the integrations, had to be done by hand. There wasn't really any. And what's really great about the cloud is the fact that we've taken these formerly fairly siloed experiences and we've really woven them together in what I call a tapestry, this fabric of experiences that allow people to take the advantages of each of the superpowers of these products without having to change applications. And I know we'll talk today a lot about how that manifests.
Yeah, we will, and a lot of the terminology there and the communication there has changed somewhat in terms of products more focusing now on experiences rather than those siloed products, and we noticed that a lot with with not just the marketing stuff that comes out, but also with I guess the integrations and providing more experiences rather than just siloed products for specific use cases, which I think is one of the reasons why when you talk about the whole suite, that it is a different way of looking at things as what used to have been done. Now, obviously we're living in a world at the moment where we're not all connected. We're not all in the, well, we are connected virtually, but we're not all in the same place. And we've spoken about this a lot recently over the last sort of 24 months, and the importance of that community and engagement, and especially the engagement of leaders and employees, but also from employees with each other, never has really been more important than it is now. And over this period, we've obviously seen, and there's been a lot of talk about the rise of Microsoft Teams during this period. How are you seeing that in relation to Yammer? Is Yammer seeing, a similar type of use?
Yes, we are, but it's been on a little bit of a different path, I would say. Back in March and April of last year, when the pandemic first hit, everyone was scrambling just to figure out how to keep the lights on, how to keep doing the jobs they were doing. So many of our customers were already connected to the cloud, but many of them weren't even really in the cloud yet. And so there was this mad scramble just to figure out how to empower people to keep doing what they needed to do. And that led to an astronomically fast rise in usage of Teams meetings, virtual events, just to keep people cranking. And that worked and it took a lot of time and effort on behalf of our customers. And from Microsoft, I'd like to thank all of our customers and folks like you, the experts, the MVPs, the influencers who've really helped customers get there. We can't underestimate what a big deal that was from technology. But as the pandemic has worn on, companies have really come to realize that just keeping people working in their work groups isn't really enough. And that we need their human needs and business needs that require people connect outside of their working groups. Things like company culture, understanding what the priorities, the mission, the objectives of the organization are, making people feel included in a mission that is something greater than their role, and learning and sharing knowledge. That as we are no longer in a physical office where we can just bump into people in the hall who we don't work with every day, we need to be able to find a digital twin for that, a digital cultural replacement, a cultural fabric. And that's really where Yammer comes in, is providing that cultural fabric in a hybrid workplace.
Yeah, and just extending on that a little bit, Yammer's often seen as an outrider and that type of thing. There's a lot of confusion, I guess. When Teams came to the forefront, do I use Teams? Do I use Yammer? There's still, and I'm sure you see it as well, there's still a little bit of confusion as to, what to use when, basically.
Yeah.
How do you explain that when you're sitting in front of a customer or, in those situations? How do you explain that?
Yeah. And on behalf of, again, Microsoft, we own some of that confusion that customers have. We've not done a great job of creating that clarity, in my opinion. And we're certainly doing better now, and we're striving to do better. When I'm talking with customers, I like to start by thinking about this as a human problem, not a technology problem. So setting the two applications aside, and we'll certainly talk more about how those are going to help. But setting the applications aside, people really do have a need to work on their working groups on the deliverables that they know are part of their core job. But as I intimated earlier, there's so many things that require us to stretch outside of those working groups. If we want to even know what that working group is supposed to do, right, we need to understand the broader mission of the organization. If we have questions that the few people in our working group can't answer, we need to be able to reach outside across the organization to find experts and get answers to questions. We need to be able to onboard effectively, understand a new role or even a new job in a new place in a new company. All of those things, culture, communications, engagement, knowledge sharing, are a very different type of communication. They're generally things that don't have to happen right away. There's an expectation that whatever you're doing with your team, you need to respond to really quickly and stay on top of. When you think about these other scenarios, there's so many things going on in an organization. No one person should be expected to stay on top of everything. That expectation isn't there, but you should be able to stay in touch with it. And you should be able to find the things that really will help you in your role and in your objectives. You should be able to tap in and pull those things out when you need them. It's sort of like a fast communication, slow communication model. And if you really think about that reality of the way people work, then you can apply the technologies to it. Teams was built for that real-time collaboration, quick response, the ability to collaborate around artifacts and applications and data in a real-time way. Yammer was built to create a social fabric that connects you with people outside and allows you to discover as well as to intentionally follow the things that are going to be valuable to you. And literally from the ground up, those two services were built differently with those things in mind. What we at Microsoft, I would say, perhaps failed our customers in doing was first helping them understand these two forms of communication. And secondly, we forced customers to go to two different places for them. You had to go to Teams for one thing, and you had to go to Yammer for another. And that's what we're really actively working to solve now, which is bringing the superpowers of Yammer, bringing the scenarios that Yammer supports into Teams so that a normal person doesn't have to think, which app do I go to for these things? It's just all there inside of Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, and that goes exactly to the point of when you're talking about experiences before rather than products. Now, with you talk about bringing the employee experience, and obviously organizations have a number of different applications that they need to go and visit day in and day out to do a particular task. But what I really love about the Yammer story here is the integration that is in Teams via the communities app.
Yeah.
Obviously, Teams is where a lot of people nowadays are starting their day, opening up Teams, and without having to then go to even now with Viva Connections, without even having to go to SharePoint to get to the intranet, everything's in the one place. How are you seeing that? Is that having a big impact on the usage of Yammer and people actually it's now clicking to say, yeah, I'm working on this. I'm working as part of a marketing team, or I'm on this project. I've got, my high velocity communication going on in this project team. But then if I need to find something from my HR team on a particular process, I can then communicate via Yammer. Is that Communities app now having it integrated into Teams having a difference there, making a difference?
Yeah, you totally nailed it. And over the course of the pandemic, I didn't address this directly, but the usage for Yammer has just gone through the roof. We're enabling tens of millions of people every single month, many of them every single week, with Yammer. And a chunk of that is because we've brought the superpowers of Yammer into Teams and into Outlook, for that matter, as the Communities app. So that proximity, and that reduced friction allows people to tap into those scenarios much more easily. In addition, one of the really key superpowers of the Communities app is that once you've deployed it, which a normal user can do through the App Store, or IT can deploy it to the organization. Once it's simply there in Teams, even if it's in the 3-dot overflow menu, it powers notifications. And so in announcements from communities you belong to, app mentions that bring you into conversations in communities, those start to surface in your Teams activity feed. So it's really integrated there. And we're seeing that that's been really successful, not only in allowing people to engage more effectively within the hub for teamwork, but also it has reduced time to understand important announcements in an organization by magnitudes. The difference is staggering. So now if an announcement is made in a community you belong to, even the all company community, likelihood is you're going to see it, that same business day in the matter of minutes rather than many hours.
Yeah. What about put you on the spot here. What about this concept of an organizational Microsoft team for a similar use case there? Is that again confusing or blurring the lines of what to use when as well?
Yeah, it certainly can. I'll try to add some clarity for customers who are thinking about, should I use a large team or a community? We just published a blog on this last week, in fact. So if you go to the Teams blog, you will see our guidance in this regard. And it really comes back to those scenarios. There are things that a team, or in this case, really a channel, can do to support real-time collaboration, co-authoring on documents. And there will be times where even a really large team needs those things. And that's what teams and channels are suited for. However, in most cases, when you have a large group of people, you're going to have a large number of conversations, and you get to this problem of overload. And Yammer not only supports magnitudes greater number of people in a container than Teams, but it also has discovery, recommendations, and all kinds of other superpowers that allow it to make sense of the activity in a group that large. So when you're really talking about collaboration and co-authoring, that kind of thing, channels are where you should be. If you're really talking about sharing and engaging, especially openly, that's absolutely where communities should be used. And there's a Venn diagram. There's at Microsoft, we have some communities who are sitting in teams. They find the collaboration capabilities are what that community needs. But one of the superpowers of Yammer's discovery, what was happening in that team, you have to join that team to see. You won't just stumble across it. And to me, that is a friction that for other community scenarios would be detrimental to the objectives of those communities.
Yeah,
that's really what it kind of boils down to.
Yeah, it does, and I think it goes to that way of working, and a lot of people want to break out of working in silos, and
Yes.
I still see, even with private Microsoft Teams or private channels and things like that work there or the communication there is still siloed, but I see a really big not shift, but a trend towards more open working and more transparent communication and things like that. And I think that's where Yammer really does come into picture there.
Yeah, to be fair, a large channel or team is also an open place to work. I think I'll say it this way, and I found for some customers this really lands for them. In a channel or team, conversation is about the objective. Right? It's about what you're doing as a team. It's leading towards a set of deliverables. In a community, conversation is the objective. Yeah. It's about the actual transfer of knowledge and tacit information, answers, ideas. And so the objective of the community itself is conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Viva Connections. And tell me a little bit about Yammer's role inside of Viva Connections.
Yeah, absolutely. So Viva, as you know, is our employee experience platform, and it today consists of 4 modules. Connections, which is you can think about as what your intranet has always wanted to be, to really provide a single gateway for employee engagement and communications and getting people to the apps and resources they need. Then there's Insights, which is about providing data-driven insights for individuals to help them manage their time and well-being, for managers and organizations to understand how the organization is getting work done and on opportunities to improve success and well-being. Learning, which is about learning, and Topics, which is about curating knowledge together using both AI and experts and knowledge mined from documents and knowledge connected in conversations. So we've got these 4 modules, and Yammer today plays strongly into 2 of them. I'll start with Topics. Topics is knowledge, and the engines, the AI engines that make Viva Topics so powerful are applied to content. And they're able to sort of understand what content is about and connect that content and the people who work on that content. Super powerful. But that's all what knowledge managers would call explicit content. It's stuff that's really there. It's documented. It's in the content. Tacit knowledge, which is the knowledge in people's heads, is more often communicated in scenarios like this, where we're talking verbally or we're in Yammer or some other communications channel. And so Yammer really lends the tacit knowledge to Microsoft Viva. If you have a community of practice where people are talking about topics and asking questions and getting answers, that knowledge will then accrue to Viva Topics and will make Viva Topics even richer. And there's this wonderful interface between Viva Topics and Yammer, where not only in a topic do you see Yammer conversations and questions and answers about the topic, but you can ask a question. And if Viva knows the answer, it will reply automatically. And if it doesn't, it will actually loop in the experts using app mentions in Yammer to bring those experts into the question to answer it for you. It will then capture that answer and be able to answer it better next time. Yeah. So really cool stuff happening, and so much on the plate for what we're going to be doing with knowledge and questions and answers moving forward. The other big interface for Yammer with Viva today is Viva Connections. And Viva Connections, as I joked, but it's kind of true, is what your internet has always wanted to be.
That's your marketing. That's your marketing.
And honestly, it's what customers have been asking us for years and years. And it's a one place where you can send people and they can get a feeling for what's going on across the organization. And that's inclusive of news coming from SharePoint, conversations and announcements coming from Yammer, and engaging content. Because if all it is corporate stuff, no one's ever going to go there, right? If all that Facebook was ads, no one would go there. You have to have real content there. And so Yammer content coming from communities you follow and even discovery content over time will show up in that feed to make it a really rich way to tap into and understand what's going on across your organization. And then in addition, Viva Connections provides a dashboard with links to apps and resources. You can configure some of those perhaps to showcase something that's going on in Yammer, like an upcoming live event. And then Viva Connections has a resources view that is kind of like your modern day portal, where it lets you get to things you need, inclusive of resources across the organization and communities. So you can think of Yammer as being the content store and the content source for where all this activity is happening. Just like in SharePoint, people are creating news in SharePoint. But the good news is your audience doesn't have to go to two different places to get that stuff. Your audience lands in Connections inside of Microsoft Teams on web, desktop, and mobile. And that feed is there, bringing it all to them. They can double click into it. They can get deeper, but they can start in one place. It's kind of a one-stop shop for communications and engagement in your organization.
Yeah, and I think that's only going to enhance the Yammer story even more. I mean, I remember even way back, building intranets and things like that, and having a common request was being able to have that sort of open dialogue and that open conversation, and you used to always fit in Yammer into an intranet scenario. People kind of wanted that sort of not hidden, but having it in a seamless sort of way where you didn't have to go and visit Yammer, or you're talking about, you're reading this in SharePoint in an intranet, you go to Yammer to have a conversation or do that sort of thing. And bringing that into the intranet was at one point the holy grail, but now with all of these other integrations with Teams, with Connections, with Topics, I think those experiences, as we say, I think is only going to enhance some of those naysayers out there that say Yammer is dead and Yammer is no longer. But I think it's going to only enhance that and improve the usage.
Yeah, in fact, without content in Yammer, your Viva Connections feed is going to be crickets.
Pretty dead, isn't it?
It's definitely fundamental to that. And to your point, it's all about experiences and bringing those experiences to people where they want to work. So the vast majority of your audience in the case of Connections is going to be in Teams, and you want to reach them there. But your community managers, the people who are really, gold with creating and maintaining vibrant communities, they're probably going to use the Yammer app for their work. And the great thing is they'll have a hero experiences for both groups of people. And it's all in one. It all is a fabric that comes in and crosses those boundaries. Yeah, it's a pretty cool world. And I do have to say, one reason we're able to start delivering this to customers is because of the cloud. It literally allows us to innovate quickly, innovate together, and bring it to customers right away. The other is the great culture that Microsoft has built. We say we're one Microsoft, and Viva and what we're doing between Yammer and Teams are just two examples of that. The product teams are working very well together. We're very lucky to have partners across Viva and Teams and Outlook and Stream, and the list goes on and on. And because we're working well together as a company with our culture, we're able to help deliver these solutions that will help customers build equally productive and agile cultures themselves. That's certainly our hope.
Yeah. I mean, it's very noticeable that obviously those teams are working well together with those integrations. Now, just moving sideways a little bit in terms of Yammer's, Yammer's continued rise here. I was reading recently a customer success story about Rabobank. Now, obviously a large organization, and they've used Yammer specifically, from my understanding, to foster a lot of this information sharing across the entire organization. In examples like technical questions or needing information about, bank products and things like that that are kind of outside of their little scope or their little area of where they work. And they're actually have launched Yammer, and that has had a really big impact in the way they communicate across the company. Can you share I know you know the customer very well. Can you share a little bit of, insight or even best practices on how that was successfully implemented?
Sure. Yeah. Rabobank, for those who don't know, is a large European bank based in the Netherlands. And as we talk about them, one of the things I always like to lead with is, if a European financial services company can find the right way to drive culture and engagement and support channels with Yammer, anyone can. So it's a great starting point for any discussion about these scenarios. You hit a couple of the great scenarios that we see at Rabobank and as well as other customers. One is support channels. Support channels are those kinds of things where there's a team that's responsible for supporting a product or a service, and that team needs to engage potentially many people across the organization. In the case of Microsoft, we have, for example, a support channel for our IT organization that's called Tech Connect. We have a support channel for our travel team called Ask MS Travel, and the list goes on and on. And these scenarios are particularly good for Yammer because they're as a team running that service or product, you need to be able to engage at scale. You need to be able to share knowledge. You want to get to a point where you're not answering the same question 1,000 times. You want to be able to scale that. As an audience or a customer of that service, that's the kind of thing you're probably not going to join and follow really closely, but when you need it, you're going to want to be able to jump into it. And so having the communities app in Teams where your audience can jump into the community when they need it, ask a question, solve a problem, get a service, and then the team can actually use the communities app or add the community as a tab in their channel so that they have it really integrated into their team's work. Is sort of the best of both worlds. The core team has a place to engage with the broader community. The broader community has a place to get support. And that's a great use case. And for people listening to the podcast, I totally encourage you to make one of your early Yammer communities an adoption community where you can share tips and tricks about how to use Microsoft 365 or any technology. That peer-to-peer answers and tips and best practice sharing is a highly successful use case.
I was just about to mention that, is at Microsoft, and this could be also with Rabobank or other organizations as well. Do you have a common way of working or what to use when type thing? Like you mentioned there, we might have an IT team that actually delivers a service, but then you've got also an IT community.
Yes.
And what to post where? Do I post it in Teams? Do I post it in Yammer? Is that just, a known thing?
No, it's something that every organization has to come to terms with, and they have to map the use of the technology with their culture. But this really illustrates one of the core concepts of when to use a team and when to use a community. And another way to think of it is the team is about making the sausage, and the community is about selling the sausage and engaging your customers. In this particular support channel scenario,
I don't know where I've heard that or read that before, but I use that. I know I read it somewhere. I can't remember who published it. Might have been you. I'm not sure, but that's a very good analogy.
Yeah, and it's a great way to sort of understand the difference between the two. Another thing, but I would also say that Microsoft is internally, our culture is very empowering. And in some ways that can be a little bit of a disadvantage. I think Rabobank was much more intentional about how they drove the technologies that they were deploying. And particularly with something that has organizational scope, intention is the key to success. The organization has to know what it's trying to achieve with something like Yammer. And in the case of Rabobank and Microsoft for that matter, culture was a big one. How do we align people around a shared sense of values and mission and objectives? And that objective will end up meaning that there is a community that has high value content that's important for people to know. So the intention leads to high value content, which then drives more awareness and engagement of what the role of that community is, and it creates a flywheel. And those kinds of organizational scenarios really do require a bit of intention, whereas like any team and any company can decide how they want to work. They can work with pen and paper. They can work with whiteboard. They can work with Microsoft 365. They can work with any kind of shadow IT product. But when you're talking about something that drives organization-wide connection and adoption, connection and outcomes, it does require some intention. And kudos to Rabobank for figuring out and making it happen and figuring out how to break through the typical IT stalemates of questions of governance and compliance by really focusing on their use cases and aligning the security, compliance, governance around those use cases.
Now, I've got two more topics before we wrap things up, and one of them is around, I guess, change management and adoption side of things. And I'm sure you've seen and come across some bad implementations and rollouts of Yammer and some good ones. What, in your opinion, what does a good rollout or adoption plan look like? Are we starting small? You mentioned like a 365 tips and tricks community as a starting point potentially. How have you seen the rollout of Yammer be successful?
Yeah, well, for sure it's about intention. And I would say the path to success is to align initial Yammer use cases with key business objectives at the time. So for example, last March and April, we had a lot of customers rolling out Yammer for the first time to deal with COVID awareness. There was really a crisis management tool. How do you keep everyone connected and how do you get knowledge and news out quickly? And then it became about culture. We saw sort of, I would say, a spike in communities just about working from home and people sharing experiences and staying connected that way. But different companies will have different objectives, whether it's a merger or acquisition that's coming, a change in leadership, back to work will certainly be a key opportunity for companies to decide how to scale the awareness and culture around hybrid workplace. So intention and aligning it with business objectives means that there will be communities that are important to people. And through, by being a member of a community and seeing what happens in it, I then say, oh, I could use this same approach to solve my problem that's a little closer to home. I think that's a generally more successful approach than saying, hey, here's a tool, you can build communities, figure out what to do with it. That's where it fails. The other thing I would say is to be also intentional about the technology. We have worked very hard at creating a great new user interface. We've brought integrations into Outlook so that people can engage in Outlook. We've talked about Teams. Please deploy the Communities app. It takes 5 minutes for an IT administrator to make it available to all of your users. It unlocks so much just by simply being there. Please, bring Yammer to the users where they're working.
I've seen that. Yeah, to your point of, I've seen that work really, really well, where people see a really engaged community, and they think they might be missing out. We want that as well. We want that for our community. It kind of organically grows in that way too, which I think is a really powerful thing. Now, the last point before we wrap things up, I know as much as you can divulge, what in your, over the next sort of 3-6 months, what are you looking forward to in terms of Yammer?
Great question. So what can I share? I would say first I'll start broadly speaking, then I'll get a little bit more tactical. Broadly speaking, we have reached a huge milestone in the release of the new Yammer. The new Yammer experience is there. It's finished. It's integrated into Teams and Outlook. Now we can turn our attention to really bringing specific scenarios, specific superpowers to specific scenarios. And we've got some really great things planned. A couple of things that I'll call out here. We are bringing a new capability for structured question and answer into every team meeting. We just announced today, in fact, when we're recording this session, that public preview will be before the end of the year. And what that allows is any team meeting of any size can have the same structured Q&A experience that we have in Yammer. It can be open, it can be moderated, but it really allows that kind of core activity in a lot of bigger meetings and webinars to happen out without requiring it to be sort of scattered through chat. So that's one example. We're bringing that superpower into Teams. You won't even know it's Yammer. It feels like part of the Teams meeting. We're also going to be bringing some additional superpowers into Outlook to make communications easier inside of Outlook. And we will continue to bring the new Yammer experience to the places it's not, such as external facing communities and networks. With all of that, then we look forward to really welcoming customers to finish their journey to what we call native mode and to the new Yammer. Because once customers are in native mode, they're fully connected to all of the capabilities of Microsoft 365. That's going to enable them to take advantage of the next wave of innovations, some of which we'll start announcing very early next year. And they will blow your mind. There are things that people will not have seen coming.
Yeah, amazing stuff. And I think, look, all the integration that's happening there is really, really, a good example of how the focus is on experiences now and not so much products. So that's it's an amazing step forward and some really good things coming out. Now, for everybody that wants to stay up to date, stay connected with you, have a conversation or reach out, what's the best place to find you and where can they get in touch?
Yeah, I'd love to carry on the conversation with you, obviously, but also your community. You can follow me on Twitter, just at Dan Holme. And that's the place I do most of my engagement with the community. And then absolutely stay on top of aka.ms/yammer/resources. That's our adoption resources, and aka.ms/yammer/blog, which is where we post all of our announcements. So I think those are the 3 resources I would point people to.
Perfect. I'll pop those in the show notes as well. But as always, me being here in Melbourne, it's late night for you there, so I'll let you go. So really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to jump on and have a chat. There was some amazing insights in there and some really good knowledge sharing there for everybody watching and listening. So I really appreciate it, mate.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for inviting me. And to everyone who's been listening, thank you for all you've done to get through the pandemic and the craziness we've all been encountering for the last year and a half. We really appreciate it and look forward to continuing to do our best to help you be successful.